Not very long ago, you wrote a very compelling piece about why you wanted to leave the EU. You've changed your mind. Why?
Well, I think that, when I first made that opinion, it was in the aftermath of the renegotiation. And there's no doubt, I think a lot of people felt disappointed by what the EU was prepared to concede at a point when there's a serious risk Britain might leave. However, I think as the debate has gone on, the important thing is to consider all aspects of this, not just the renegotiation, but ultimately, is Britain going to be better off or worse off in the entirety? Particularly for me as the chair of the Health Committee and someone who came into politics campaigning about health, ultimately as well I have to ask myself, is the NHS going to be better off or worse off? Depending on the outcome. And I asked myself, my postal vote arrived, it's still sitting in my kitchen, and I realised that actually how was I going to feel on the morning of the 24th if I woke up and the result had been a vote to leave, and I had been part of that, albeit only one in many millions of that. And I realised actually I'd feel a sense of loss, that we really had lost something, and that made me feel uncomfortable. So I am now actually going to vote to remain.
But what are the specific reasons that led you to that?
Well, I think, first of all, undoubtedly the consensus now is that there would be a huge economic shock if we voted to leave. And as far as the NHS is concerned, the question is there going to be a dividend for leaving, or is there going to be a Brexit penalty? And I think that undoubtedly the thing that is most going to influence the financial health of the NHS is the background economy. So I think there would be a shock. So I think there would be a Brexit penalty rather than a dividend. And I think there's also something about the way that the Leave campaign have operated that makes me feel uncomfortable. I think to emblazon on the side of their battle bus a figure that implies that 350 million a week could be there for the benefit of the NHS simply isn't true. And they know that's not true. It doesn't take account of the rebate, it doesn't take account of all the other things that we've committed to carry on funding. So there simply wouldn't be 350 million a week to spend on the NHS. So that's made me feel uncomfortable as well.
So it's partly the behaviour of the Out campaign has driven you away from them?
I think certainly right from the start the use of that figure. I mean, for someone like me who has long campaigned for open and honest data in public life, I couldn't have stepped foot on a battle bus that has as the heart of its campaign a figure that I know to be untrue, and that I think they know to be untrue as well. So I think if you're in a position where you can't hand out a vote leave leaflet, you can't be campaigning for that organisation. And it's not just about health, it's about other things as well, our place in the world, our security. And take, for example, I guess over the last few weeks I've had a lot of conversations, for example, with my father, he's just been a patient in the NHS, and he started his life as a teenager as a mine clearance diver, one of the Navy's youngest, after the war. And for him, this isn't just an abstract concept, the possibility of conflict in Europe. It's a very real threat. So for many people, the idea that we could be part of a process that could lead to instability in the long run, I think that's very worrying.
With respect, it's a perfectly human thing to change your mind, but as a senior MP, many of the arguments that have now pushed you towards choosing to remain were already around.
Of course,
when you made a very public statement that you wanted out.
It's a very difficult decision to make, because I realise that nobody really likes politicians who change their minds. But I guess you have to also put into that mix that nobody also wants politicians who make what they believe to be the wrong decision. So I think it would have been far worse for me not to be honest about the fact that, having now looked at the big picture, I honestly think that it's the right thing to do to vote to stay.
Do you think some of your other colleagues might also be having second thoughts about...
Oh, I'm sure. And I think any politician who's not prepared to have second thoughts shouldn't be doing the job. So ultimately, what do we want from our politicians? Do we want them to be open about their choices, and sometimes to express their views during the process of a campaign, and actually, like everybody else out there, start in one place and finish somewhere else?
So do you think others who joined the Out campaign in the early days might follow you and choose Remain?
Well, of course, and there may be people, of course, who go in the other direction.
Just lastly, when you look at some of the name calling, frankly, because that's what it's been, on both sides, the Prime Minister's called some of his cabinet colleagues liars. On the other side, people have been accused of being doom mongers and all sorts of things. How does that make you feel about your party?
I think it's been really unfortunate. I don't think that people want to see that in their politicians, and I think that for the remaining weeks of the campaign it would be much better if people stepped back from that, focused on the issues, focused on explaining honestly and openly how they've reached their decisions, including whether that means they've changed over the course of the campaign,